Tund woke up with a start, his body jolting like it had been splashed with cold water. His room was pitch dark, except for the faint moonlight creeping through the cracked wooden shutters. His heart skipped a beat when he saw a figure standing over him. "Toby," he called, his voice shaky. The figure stepped closer, and Tund's eyes widened in shock. It was his younger brother, Toby, but something about him felt wrong. Toby's usually kind eyes were sharp and determined, and in his hands was their late father's hunting rifle. "Toby, what are you doing with Papa's gun?" Tund whispered, sitting up quickly. Toby's lips curled into a thin, tense smile. "We can't survive this life without taking what they owe us," he whispered, his voice low but steady. Tund's mind raced. "What are you talking about? Who owes us anything?" Toby tightened his grip on the rifle, his voice shaking now. "Those people in the big house on the hill. Their father took everything from ours. Papa worked for them all his life, but when he got sick, they didn't even look our way. Mama cried every night, Tund, and now we're here struggling to eat while they live like kings." Tund felt a chill run through him. He stood up, his hands raised as if calming a wild animal. "Toby, this isn't the way. Papa wouldn't want this. You know that." Toby laughed bitterly. "Papa is dead, Tund. He isn't here to see how we're suffering. I am tired of watching Mama starve and you break your back on the farm. Tonight, we take what's ours." "No," Tund said firmly. "Put the gun down. You don't know what you're doing." Toby's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but he shook his head. "If you're not with me, then stay here. But I'm going, and no one will stop me." Before Tund could respond, Toby turned and walked out into the night. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving Tund frozen in place. The air was thick with fear and uncertainty. Tund knew he had to act fast. If he didn't, this night could end in disaster. Tund stood by the door, his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't know what to do. Toby was out there, holding their late father's rifle, determined to take what he believed was owed to them. The weight of the moment pressed down on Tund, and for the first time, he felt unsure of everything. He glanced over at the corner of his room where their mother's photograph sat on the old wooden shelf. Her tired smile reminded him of everything they had lost, everything they had worked for, but it also reminded him of Papa's last words, the promise he made to her before he died. "We will make sure Tund and Toby are never without." Tund grabbed his jacket and rushed outside, the cool night air hitting his face like a slap. The moon hung high above, and the village was eerily silent. He followed the dim trail left by Toby's footsteps, moving quickly but quietly through the dark paths. His thoughts raced. If Toby really goes through with this, it will destroy us. The people in the big house, they're powerful. We'll be hunted down. This isn't what Papa wanted. But how do I stop him? Ahead, Tund spotted Toby. His younger brother was standing in front of the gate of the big house, the rifle held tightly in his hands. The lights inside the house glowed softly, casting long shadows across the driveway. Toby looked back at Tund, his expression a mix of anger and sadness. "You shouldn't have followed me," Toby said, his voice barely a whisper. Tund's heart sank. "Toby, please. We don't have to do this. It's not too late to turn back. We're better than this." Toby shook his head, tears streaming down his face. "You don't understand. They took everything from us. Mama has nothing, and now we have nothing." Tund took a step forward, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. "I know we're struggling, but hurting others won't make things better. We can rebuild. Toby, we can find another way. Please, put the gun down." Toby's grip tightened on the rifle, and for a moment, Tund thought his brother might fire. But instead, Toby looked down at the rifle, his fingers trembling. "Why can't you understand? This is the only way out," Toby muttered. Just then, the sound of a door creaking open came from the house. Tund froze. The lights inside flickered. and a figure emerged from the shadows, the head of the household. Mr. O'Keefe, the very man who had once taken advantage of their father. Tun's blood ran cold. He knew they had no choice now, but to face the truth. This was not just about their family anymore. It was about the people who had caused their suffering. And Tund had to decide, was he going to let Toby destroy everything? Or could he find a way to end this madness before it was too late? He took another step toward his brother, hoping it wasn't already too late. Mr. O'Keefe stepped out of his grand house, his shadow long and imposing under the dim light. His white shirt gleamed in the moonlight, and his expensive shoes clicked against the stone pathway as he walked toward the brothers. His cold eyes scanned Tund and Toby, who stood frozen, Toby still holding the rifle. Well, what do we have here? Mr. O'Keefe's voice was smooth, almost mocking. 2 young men on my property in the middle of the night, and with a gun, no less. Tund's stomach twisted. He could hear his heart thudding in his ears. Why is he out here? Does he know what we were planning? Mr. O'Keefe, Tund began, his voice shaking but steady. Please, we don't want trouble. We just want to go back to our lives. But my brother, he's lost. We need help, we just... Mr. O'Keefe raised a hand, cutting Tund off. Don't talk to me about help. Your father didn't need help when he worked for me. He was loyal, a good man. But loyalty doesn't feed a family. And now here you are, looking for something that wasn't given to you. Toby's eyes flared with anger. You think you can get away with it, don't you? All these years you took from us. You and your rich friends. We have nothing, and you don't care. Mr. O'Keefe smiled, but there was no warmth in it, only the cold calculation of a man who had everything and knew how to keep it. I owe you nothing, Toby. Life doesn't hand out favors. Your father was just a man. I've given your family work, but work is all it was. And now you want to take what's not yours. A rifle won't change your fate, boy. Tund took a step forward, trying to reach his brother. Toby, listen to me. This is not the way. But Toby, his hands trembling, lifted the rifle to his shoulder. You don't understand. I'm tired of watching us suffer while they get fat on our misery. I will make them pay. Mr. O'Keefe's eyes gleamed with something that chilled Tund to the bone. He looked at Toby, then at the rifle, and finally at Tund with a knowing smile. If you think that gun will change your life, then I suggest you use it quickly. But know this, once you cross this line, there's no turning back. It will be the end of everything, your family, your home, your future. The words hung in the air, thick with the promise of violence. Tund felt the weight of the decision closing in on him. But then, a strange thing happened. A figure stepped out from behind the shadows. A person who Tund never expected to see in this place. Mama, Tund gasped, rushing to her side. She looked at them both, her face filled with sadness and something else, fear, perhaps, or resignation. Tund, Toby, listen to me, she said softly. This isn't the way. Toby's eyes widened. Mama, what are you doing here? She stepped closer to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. I've watched your father suffer. I've watched you both grow. But this will destroy you, my son. Please don't do this. Toby stared at her, and for a moment, Tund saw the conflict in his brother's eyes, the struggle between anger and love, revenge and reason. But Mr. O'Keefe's laughter broke the moment. How touching, he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But it changes nothing. You came for justice, but you'll find none here. Tund turned to his mother. Mama, what is he saying? You know the truth. You know what happened to Papa. She looked at him with a pained expression. The truth, my son, is that sometimes we don't get justice. Sometimes we must let go of the past to move forward. The air felt heavy, thick with tension. Tund's heart was racing. He knew they were at a crossroads, one path leading to destruction, and the other to an uncertain future. Toby raised the rifle once more. This time, it was no longer just a weapon, it was a symbol of everything they had lost, everything they had endured. And now, the question was clear: would they seek revenge? Or would they choose to walk away from the edge of destruction? Tun's mind spun as he stared at the rifle in Toby's hands. His brother was no longer the playful, innocent child who used to run around the farm with a smile on his face. This was a different Toby, a Toby consumed by anger and pain. Someone who believed the only way forward was through violence. Mama's hand still rested gently on Toby's shoulder, but her face was etched with sorrow. She knew the cost of what was about to happen. "Please, Toby," Mama whispered. "Let go of the rifle. This isn't the way. It won't bring Papa back." Toby's eyes welled with tears, but his grip on the rifle remained firm. "How can I let go, Mama? How can I forget all we've suffered? How can I just sit back and watch them live without consequences?" His voice was raw, full of pain. Tun stepped closer, his voice desperate. "Toby, I know you're angry. I know we've been through a lot. But violence isn't the answer. It won't make things right. It'll only destroy us." Toby shook his head, his breath quickening. "You don't get it, Tund. You've always been the one to follow the rules, to believe things will get better if we just wait. But I'm done waiting. I'm done being patient." Tun's heart broke as he saw the fierce determination in his brother's eyes. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about Toby's belief that there was no way out of their suffering. But Tund knew that if Toby went through with this, there would be no turning back. Mr. O'Keefe stood by, watching with a cold smile. He had no intention of stopping them, he had already made his move. He knew that in the end, Toby's actions would only harm them. Tun turned to Mama, his voice trembling. "We have to stop him, before it's too late." Mama nodded slowly, her eyes filled with pain. "I've seen what revenge can do, Tund, I've lived it. Your father tried to fight for what was ours, but it only brought him suffering. I didn't want you both to learn that the hard way." Tun's thoughts raced. He had to find a way to reach his brother before it was too late. He glanced at Mr. O'Keefe, who stood smugly in the background. Tun's eyes narrowed. Without warning, he stepped forward, placing himself between Toby and Mr. O'Keefe. "Toby, listen to me," Tun said, his voice steady but urgent. "You think taking revenge will make everything right, but it won't. They'll just turn the tables on us. It'll be us against the world, and we'll lose." Toby's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He glanced at the rifle in his hands, then at Tund, his face twisted with frustration. "What am I supposed to do, Tund? Just let them get away with everything? How can I live with that?" Tund reached out, placing a hand on Toby's arm. "We fight, Toby, but not with a gun. We fight with our hearts, with our minds. We show them that we don't need their wealth to survive. We don't need to become like them to win. We take back what's ours by living with honor, by not letting their cruelty destroy us." Toby's grip on the rifle loosened slightly, but his eyes were still clouded with doubt. "And what if it's not enough? What if we never get what we deserve?" Tund looked deep into his brother's eyes. "We make our own destiny, Toby, and it starts with what we do right now. We don't let them control us. We don't let hate blind us." For a long moment, there was silence. The weight of the situation hung heavy between them. But Tund knew that this was the moment of truth. He had to make Toby see that revenge wasn't the answer. Then, unexpectedly, Toby dropped the rifle to the ground with a thud. His face crumpled, and he fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know what to do anymore, Tund," Toby sobbed. "I just want the pain to end." Tund knelt beside him, pulling his brother into a tight embrace. "It's okay. We'll figure it out, together. We'll rebuild. But we have to let go of the anger. It's the only way." Mama stepped forward, placing a hand on both their shoulders. "There's always another way, my sons. And you've just found it." As the moonlight bathed them in its gentle glow, the weight of their choices seemed to lift. For the first time in a long while, there was hope. The path ahead was uncertain, but at least they were on it together. And as Tund looked up at the dark sky, he knew that, for once, they had made the right choice. The sun began to rise, casting a soft golden light over the village. The air was cooler now, as the night's tension slowly faded into the early morning stillness. Tund, Toby, and Mama sat together under the shade of a large tree in the yard, their hearts heavy but at peace. Tund knew they had made the right choice, but the road ahead was still uncertain. Their family had suffered long enough, and while the future was no longer clouded by the storm of revenge, it was now filled with questions. How would they rebuild? What would become of them now? Toby had fallen silent after he dropped the rifle, his eyes staring at the ground as if searching for something. The anger had drained out of him, but it was replaced with a deep sadness. He hadn't realized how much he had been carrying until now. "I'm sorry, Tund," Toby whispered after a long pause. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought that if we didn't fight back, we would be lost forever." Tund placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "I know, Toby, I know. But fighting the way they wanted us to fight, that wasn't the answer. We can't let anger guide us." Toby nodded slowly, tears welling up again. "I don't know if I can ever forget what they did to us, to Papa, but I don't want to live in this anger anymore." Mama smiled gently, her voice soft and reassuring. "It will take time, my sons. Healing isn't easy, but you've made the first step. Together, we can make sure the past doesn't control our future." They sat in silence for a while longer, the peace between them a stark contrast to the storm they had just weathered. In the distance, the village began to stir as people started their daily routines, unaware of the decision that had just been made on their behalf. But as the day went on, something shifted. The weight of the past still hung over them, but Tund knew they had made the choice that would define their future. They wouldn't allow bitterness and hate to be the legacy of their family. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. Nothing in life ever was, but it would be their journey, one built on love, forgiveness, and the strength to rise above. Later that day, as Tund and Toby stood together in front of the old house, Tund turned to his brother with a new understanding. "We don't need their wealth or their power. We have something stronger, each other, and together we can rebuild." Toby smiled for the first time in days. It was small, but it was a start. "Yeah, together." And with that, they turned their backs on the house that had caused so much pain and walked forward into the unknown, side by side. The rifle had been left behind, and so had the anger. What remained was a family, united in the hope that tomorrow could be better than today. The past had shaped them, but it would no longer define them. They had chosen a new path, and in that choice, Tund knew they had finally found peace.